This is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're exploring the state support for civil legal services to low-income New Yorkers, an issue that has become a recurring topic of debate during budget negotiations under Governor Kathy Hochul. For more on why it's important to fund these services and the inside baseball undermining those efforts in 2026, we're joined in the studio by Kristin Brown, President and CEO of the Empire Justice Center. Welcome back to the show, Kristin.
Thank you so much.
So most listeners are probably familiar with the idea of getting a lawyer provided to them if they can't afford one, but this is almost exclusively a guarantee for criminal court. Can you explain why it's important to still provide at least some sort of safety net for low-income New Yorkers trying to navigate the civil court system?
In civil matters, unlike criminal matters, there's no right to counsel for individuals who can't afford a lawyer. And so what that means is oftentimes folks are facing eviction, foreclosure, consumer debt, loss of economic supports without having a lawyer to represent them when they're low income. And always the other side, the government, the bank, et cetera, are represented by a lawyer. So the state of New York provides funding to civil legal services organizations to represent low-income consumers and individuals in these matters.
Well, yeah. Can you walk us through this type of support that is available for those people who are living, at or below 125% of the poverty level, including what sounds like a unique funding stream, but has become very important, this interest generated from escrow accounts maintained by attorneys?
Yes. So I'll start with describing the Interest on Lawyers Account Fund, IOLA Fund. So New York State in the 80s created a fund that was at the time unique, but now there's a fund like this in every state across the country that pools the interest on lawyers' accounts and makes that funding available to support civil legal services for low-income people. This is in New York. The IOLA Fund is a fiduciary fund. It's governed by a board of trustees that are appointed by government officials, by the governor. And every year there's tens and hundreds of millions of dollars made available to civil legal services organizations to represent low-income New Yorkers. So what we're talking about when we're talking about representing low-income New Yorkers is thinking about the essentials of life. So your housing stability is at risk. Your disability benefits, your SNAP benefits have been denied, and you need an attorney to help you navigate the complicated processes to exert your rights. Another thing that IOLA-funded organizations do, civil legal services organizations do, is educate low-income New Yorkers about what their legal rights are. So we're out on the streets in the neighborhoods educating immigrants about their rights. We're talking to people who are interested in applying for public service loan forgiveness. And so really anything that you can think of where you're interacting with a system that is complex and is governed by laws and rules, civil legal aid organizations might be providing legal assistance.
Well, as you pointed out, there's a board that is responsible for determining how much is going to be spent and what organizations are going to receive money. But the reason this is a recurring budget issue is because you need that allocating authority. You need authority to spend that money. The governor, though, has sort of waded in with her own feelings about what that allocation should look like in any given year. What does it look like in 2026, and how does it compare to what you were hoping to spend from this interest accounts?
So one of the really incredible things about the IOLA Fund is because it's interest earned on lawyers' accounts, it's not taxpayer dollars. But as you know, the structure of the fund requires the governor to provide authority to spend the funding. In the last many years, interest rates have been so incredibly high. The IOLA Fund has really been able to dramatically increase the funding for civil legal aid organizations. And so a year ago, the IOLA Fund did a 5-year contract for and sort of ramped up funding for civil legal aid services. The 5-year contract was meant to provide stability to nonprofit organizations and that have been at terrible risk because of some of the things that are happening at the federal level. And but with the ramp up every year, the increased spending authority is necessary from the governor. And in this year's budget, the governor only provided flat spending authority. And it ended up being in the executive budget approximately a 25% reduction in funding that is needed to make good on the contracts that are going to start April 1st, 2026.
And so we're talking, what, authorizing about $75 million, and you wanted about $100 million?
$77.5 million was authorized, and $102.5 million is what we need.
And has the governor indicated how she would like to spend the difference there? Because the last time we were talking about this issue, and I say we, I mean the Capitol Press Room, it was primarily, at least in their pitching of this, to fund other civil legal services like the homeowner protection program. Is there any indication that she's looking to do something similarly altruistic with this money this go around?
Well, I'm happy to say that there doesn't seem to be an indication that she's looking to do anything different with the funding. Mm-hmm. And we're very hopeful that at the end of the day, the governor and the legislature will come together to provide the full spending authority, because the services that are provided by IOLA-funded organizations very much support the governor's affordability agenda. We're representing immigrants who are facing deportation. We're preserving home ownership. We're supporting people staying in their apartments. So the affordable housing crisis is addressed by a lot of the work that we do. The crisis in the family courts, we're representing, families that are in need of representation there. So our hope is that at the end of the day, this is just something that will, be resolved in the budget, and we'll be able to go ahead with the work that was planned. Again, 5-year contracts. For me as a CEO, when I put my budget together for 2026, I had a contract with a dollar amount that we would be receiving. And so if this doesn't happen, that'll be about a $500,000 cut to my organization, and that same sort of reduction will happen to over 80 organizations all over the state that are funded by IOLA. So, that's going to be job loss, that's going to be loss of services, and this is not something that I think the governor or the legislature wants to see happen.
Well, before we move on, let me reintroduce you for listeners just joining us. This is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're speaking with Kristin Brown, President and CEO of the Empire Justice Center. You mentioned the historically high interest rates that we've seen in recent years. There are indicators that interest rates are going down and might go down in the future if the president has his way. And we saw in the aftermath of the Great Recession that this account generated very little comparatively in interest. So is there reason to believe that there is the capacity to take $100 million in this year's budget and in the future and not eat into that general principle from these accounts?
Well, one of the things that we've seen the directors of the IOLA fund do over the past many years is, in reaction to the low earnings that occurred when interest rates were so incredibly low, they really planned ahead. And so we know that, for example, the commitment of funding over the next 5 years, those resources are there. Okay. And they're looking ahead and trying to be very, very thoughtful and conservative to ensure that there aren't dramatic reductions in funding for these services in the out years. And so that's, theoretically, if interest rates go down and the earnings, align, at least we'll have, as a community, the opportunity to plan for reductions rather than, the way it was a couple of decades ago. It was, all over the place, and, we would be looking at significant reductions year over year, volatility.
So it sounds like the governor can't claim, I'm just protecting the long-term solvency of these accounts by only authorizing $77 million. It sounds like you guys have already taken that into consideration.
I believe that's the way the IOLA fund is looking at it, and the Board of Trustees are looking at it, yeah.
Well, lastly, what about changing the structure of these payouts? Because we see something like the Tobacco Settlement Fund, where they don't have to come to Albany every year to say, please let me spend this amount of money. Is there anything on the horizon that you think might give you that flexibility moving forward so that you can spend this money without being entangled in this insider baseball?
There was a bill that was introduced when a couple of years ago when there was a attempted sweep of
Sure.
funds into the general fund. And as you referenced, some of the funds were used to pay for other civil legal services organization funding for specific issue areas. And that really was focused on ensuring that the IOLA fund was, the funds from IOLA were only used for what they were meant to be used for statutorily, so for civil legal services specifically and at the direction of the Board of Trustees. Given the way that things have been playing out this year, having independence for the IOLA board does seem as though it would be useful, it would be helpful, it would be help our community not end up in this position. And if that is something that is the legislature is looking to do, I think we would be very, very interested in exploring it.
And I know I said finally, but it's my show, I can backtrack. What about other additional streams of support for civil legal services? Should that be part of the conversation in Albany as well? I mean, does $100 million meet the demands that are out there? Or if you had additional resources, could nonprofits beef up their civil legal services and maybe provide either services to people making above $125,000 of that federal poverty level, which is still very poor, or maybe expand it to other areas?
I mean, one of the things that in the last couple of years, the Permanent Commission on Access to Justice, which reports to the Chief Judge, has done is try to quantify what it would cost to meet the civil legal need here in New York, and the estimate was another $1 billion. So, we are very far from meeting the need. We're really just sort of making a dent in what the civil legal needs are of low-income New Yorkers. So absolutely additional resources are desperately needed. And that's part of the reason why it's so important to make sure that the resources that are already scheduled to be provided to represent immigrants, represent homeowners and renters and people facing consumer debt are available, and that these, and that we're maintaining the existing commitment. And yes, absolutely, additional resources are always needed.
Are you agnostic about where additional resources might come from? Because you made a point that the IOLA money is not taxpayer money, but I think that an argument can be made that it's in the public's interest to fund this type of thing with taxpayer money. So any preference on where additional dollars might come from?
I think we're open to every discussion, every option. And, I think it's been demonstrated that this is a good investment, right? We have really good documentation that over $5.3 billion worth of government savings and resources come in as a result of the current commitment of civil legal services here in New York. So every single dollar that's invested generates, multiple times of savings, and also just really stabilizes communities.
Well, we've been speaking with Kristin Brown. She's the president and CEO of the Empire Justice Center. Kristin, thanks for visiting us in the studio.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to today's edition of the Capitol Press Room. For an insider take on what's happening in state government, check out our Dispatches from Planet Albany show, available wherever you get podcasts or at capitolpressroom.org.
Join us again for Capitol Press Room, a production of WCNY Connected, Syracuse.